Everybody get up, no need to cram now. We got a real jam going down, going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. Welcome to the IntelliJAMS. Here's your chance.
All right, Adam. What do you want to jam on? What do you want to jam on this week?
Song, by the way, this song's so good.
It's becoming iconic.
Yeah. One of my favorite topics: should I raise or lower my prices? How do you feel about that?
All right, let's do that one.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to pose a question then. Should I raise or should I lower my prices? Which
You
one?
should be lowering your prices. But actually, okay.
Whoa, what a surprise.
Let's peel that back. Yeah, exactly. I very selfishly want everyone to be lowering their prices. Let's curb inflation right now. Okay, there's no one size fits all here. We actually wrote an article that was published in HBR, very interesting, about over 1,000 tests that we looked at and what was the winner. It turns out 2/3 of the time lowering the prices was the winner. Now, why? It turns out consumers in this economy are very price sensitive. And so small changes to price have outsized impact on conversion. So a 5% increase in price can yield a 10% increase in decrease in conversion. A 5% decrease in price can yield a 10% increase in conversion. So I would say that tends to hold across a lot of different products and a lot of different industries, from cheap consumables to really expensive furniture and one-time purchases. So I have seen that across the board. The factor that matters more and tends to differ a lot more is your margin profile. And so if you have very thin margins and your COGS are really high and your cost of shipping and fulfillment are high, then a price decrease eats pretty quickly into those margins. And so therefore, you would need a tremendous increase in sales to offset that pretty large chunk of margin hit. But for a lot of brands that we work with have 70, 80, I've literally worked with brands in the 90% gross margins. It's really hard. Like, basically what you're trying to do is revenue optimize. And when you have 90% margins, and a 5% decrease in price for a 10% increase in conversion is a tremendously revenue optimizing strategy. So that's where the nuance behind the hot take of you should be lowering your prices.
Yeah. And I think it goes without saying that if you drop your prices, I think the average person coming into this conversation is going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. I drop my prices, my conversion goes up. Do I get enough conversion from that price drop to actually see a winning outcome? And from what we've seen, it does. What about on the flip side of this? When I want to, because I don't think I don't think anyone's boss is coming to them and going, yo, Alex, I really want you to go lower our prices. I feel like people are always looking for, can I raise my prices? Can I get shipping included into this and not have to eat that shipping cost myself? Can I try to or even tariffs is something that's on people's minds right now. Can I add tariffs into my price? Can I pass that through to the customer, or should I be absorbed?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. And actually, just to poke some holes in that, when you lower prices, are you potentially pulling forward sales? And so it's not that you're selling more, it's just that you're selling them now. When you lower your prices, are you potentially reducing your ability to run offers and promotions and sales and things like that? And so now actually you have a lower everyday price, retail MSRP, but when you want to run a sale, now you have a little less room to go on.
It's not as motivating.
You've lowered your price. If you have a wholesale retail arrangement with a Target or a Walmart, also that's not going to necessarily be the best strategy, because they're just going to want to buy from you at half of your MSRP. So there's other considerations to take into account here. So yeah, your boss being no boss has ever come to me and been let's lower our prices. It's true. I think that then okay, how do we find the opportunities to raise our price with some other incentive, some other positioning change to try and see if we can justify that higher price? I think makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that's definitely something to consider. And part of why when you run an A/B test, what's great about it is you have data that is pretty, again, there might be nuances to consider, but for the most part is unarguable. And so when you look at, okay, at this lower price point, at lower margins, it's actually selling, generating more profit. How much more profit? And like, is that enough to justify some of the other trade-offs we talked about? Maybe.
Yeah, you hit on something there too. Like, I had never even thought till you just said it there about like, hey, I drop my prices. Was that actually a reaction to the price dropping, or did I just like clear through a bunch of people who were thinking and like knew it was a price drop and viewed it more as a discount than an actual price change? It was like really interesting. And what you're talking about there from like an A/B testing perspective, like maybe this is kind of like the final thought on this jam is like A/B testing a price change versus just making the change on the site. Because like you hear a lot of people when they come to us, they're like, hey, I want to get some more sophisticated with my price testing. And sometimes they've already done something, right? It's like, oh, I raised all my prices by 10% and I let it run for a week to see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many week over week changes. That's the obvious thing. But so, the second week in February might be different than the first week in February. Maybe it was cold or sunny, or, some people were really upset about the Super Bowl or whatever, like there's all sorts of things that can drive a week over week change that's going to that's going to correlate to the changes in price that you made week over week, but not necessarily. So that's the obvious thing. Maybe a less so obvious thing that you said that triggered something for me, which is like with an A/B test and some of this data, you can actually look at it by different slices. So you could say, okay, how did this affect people who are returning to the website? And so these are people who had been on my website before this test started. Now they're back. How did that lowering price or raising price change their likelihood of converting versus people who like hit the site for the first time or came through a marketing channel that is for prospects and like just trying to get new people through the door. So you can look at all these different things. It's like, okay, a big question people ask is like, how would lowering my prices affect a specific channel for me? And by the way, not every channel is equal.
I think that's so important. And one thing that's really surprised me is like sometimes you'll look at a change and you'll be like, oh, this was a bad experiment. The change I made has resulted in less profitability, less revenue, less conversion, whatever you want to look at. But then when you start to dig down, you're like, oh, this was a losing outcome, but it was actually a winning outcome
in some segments
here.
Yeah.
Why? And like the ability, again, like an A/B test or using something like IntelliJAMS where you get that analytical instrumentation to go and dig like this versus like, hey, I made the change on the site and just trying to kind of see like how did revenue change kind of like high level. It's really hard to go find the nuance when you do something like that. It's a lot easier when you're running a test.
100%. And then with, different personalization and rollout tools, you can target different people differently and people can see different experiences. And that's not, I don't think that's uncommon. And it's like, I would say that's a best practice these days. One thing that I also I feel would be remiss if I didn't say it, when you, let's say I was making the case for lowering prices, and obviously like every brand is different and like we should test this and understand what the implications are. But a side effect that I think has a lot of value that people undervalue is the second and third order effects of selling more products. So let's say you lower prices, the increase in conversion more than offsets the reduction in price and the reduction in margin. So, okay, I'm making more money and I have more product out in the world. So that's more people who could become future buyers, right? There's an LTV effect. There's more people who can become evangelists for my product and tell their friends. And so there's that sort of network effect. And if I really start selling a shit ton more product, I could potentially increase my MOQ for my manufacturer and lower my COGS profile, in which case I'm back to my original margins. And like I've lowered my price and I'm back to my original margins just because I'm increasing the volume of my sales. So there's all sorts of other like knock-on effects of selling more is good. And I think that, again, it depends on like what season of life we're in and what stage of your business you're at and what your margin profiles are and what the sensitivity is to prices for your consumers. So I don't want to oversimplify here, but it's, I don't know. I'm a big fan of lowering prices.
I mean, like what it comes down to there is like, if I sell more and I sell it more profitably, then I have profits to reinvest in my growth. And when I have profits to reinvest in my growth, then all these knock-on effects can start happening. Whereas if it's just like more of the same, or hey, I'm like slightly converting slightly higher, but it's not really making a huge difference in the profitability. I've just increased my revenue slightly or my conversion slightly. I can't take that and go and reinvest it into, like you were saying, a higher order on my next run, or the ability to, I don't know, at like insane scale. It's like my warehouse went from this size to this size. I can now hold more inventory. I can reduce my COGS. Like I can start to, again, reinvest and find new ways to become more profitable over time.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I mean, there's a lot of levers here, to your point. Like, it's not, pricing is one of them, and it's a big lever, but it's important to see it as part of the bigger picture here.
I think this is going to be a theme on this show, is like, for too long, e-com and D2C has just been about like promotional excellence. And what it, like, more what I mean by that is like advertising is like, how do I become as efficient as I can be with advertising? And essentially what we want to keep communicating and highlighting is like, there are so many other aspects of your business where you can become excellent at to drastically change. It's not all about advertising.
And by the way, it's so funny that you bring up advertising. Like, lowering your prices could also have, like, that will potentially lower your CAC, because increased conversion, better efficiency, and now you have a lower CAC, and you can pump more money into your marketing because, okay, that CAC scales better. It's like, there's so many, this is not like, it's really important not to look at your business from like a very narrow lens. And like, it's important to see the big picture here.
The P's of marketing. You got to have all of them. You can't just focus on one.
You got to have all the P's.